Most important figures in American history, especially when it comes to separation of church and state and secular government. Many people think of that principle and they think of Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson, after all, conjured up the famous metaphor of the wall of separation between church and state. But many of Jefferson's ideas would have remained just that if Madison had not put them into our government. And Madison knew that we had done something special in the United States. In his life, later in his life, he corresponded with many friends. In 1822, he wrote to a friend, quote, "We are teaching the world a great truth, that governments do better without kings and nobles than with them. The merit will be doubled by the other lesson, that religion flourishes in greater purity without rather than with the aid of government." The United States was still a relatively young country when Madison wrote those words. We had only existed for 33 years. Yet here was Madison saying we had something we could export to the rest of the world. Secularism, separation of church and state. We are teaching the world, Madison wrote. What a brash thing for a young man to say. And I often imagine, what is the United States teaching the world today? Quite different things, I am afraid. We are teaching the world that facts mean nothing and can be ignored if you find them inconvenient. That reality is whatever a strong man says it is. That you need not believe evidence from your own eyes. That you can ignore scientific evidence. That the powerful will assume control over all others. We are gathered here today for an important occasion. The 120th anniversary of French secularism. I extend my hearty congratulations on this milestone. Yet I find it ironic that the United States, which pioneered secular government, is rapidly abandoning the principle. Our situation is dire, and it is my sad duty today to inform you that you can no longer count on the United States to stand up and teach the world about secular government. That lesson will have to come from other nations, such as France. Our unfortunate situation can be laid at the feet of Donald Trump. When he was first elected in 2016, I thought it was a fluke. He did not win the popular vote, but due to a quirk in our system, he eked out a victory in the Electoral College. But in 2024, Trump did win the majority vote. A majority of Americans voted for him, knowing full well that he has no respect for our democracy. Knowing full well that he had incited a mob to attack the Capitol on January 6, 2021. Knowing full well that he is intellectually stunted, crass, and knowing that he is a convicted sex offender. As a result of this, our democracy is teetering. Tanks and armed soldiers prowl our major cities. People with the wrong skin color are being pulled off the street and shipped off to we don't know where. Trump and his allies openly scheme to stay in power even if people don't want them there. And neo-fascists rig elections. Trump's perceived enemies are hauled off into court on bogus counts. The Supreme Court, meanwhile, does nothing. Our country, the United States, is plagued with two strands of fascism, and I do not hesitate to use that word. One strand is brought about by a plutocratic billionaire class that does not want to pay taxes and does not want any regulation of its businesses. The second strand is a group of de facto fundamentalists who are trying to make the United States a de facto Christian nation. These two camps have made common cause to topple our democracy, and the results of their handiwork are easy to see. Women no longer have reproductive freedom in many states. Members of the LGBT community, especially transgender Americans, are seeing their rights steadily eroded. Discrimination against non-Christians and non-believers is rampant. Books are being banned all over my country. And in several states, laws have been passed mandating that giant posters of the Ten Commandments be placed in all of our public schools. Billions of dollars are now siphoned out of the treasury into the coffers of private religious schools. Now, I've spent the past several months traveling my country, speaking in everywhere from Colorado to Texas to Iowa and Missouri. And everywhere I go, people ask me, what can we do? The problem is there's no easy answer to that. The benefits of democracy and secular government would seem to be self-evident. But people have, a majority at least, temporarily, has rejected them for whatever reason. And having lost them, they will not be easily reestablished. I can't tell you where my country's headed. I used to think our democratic norms and traditions were strong enough to withstand the challenges that we face. But I no longer believe that. Something must break. My hope is that whatever America goes through, it does not involve violence and death, although we've already seen some of that. I have some ideas about how we can create a better future in America, ideas that may be of use in other countries as well. First of all, in America, we need explicit references to separation of church and state and secular government in our Constitution. They are not explicit now, they are inferred. They need to be explicitly placed in that document. Second, the United States needs a system of welfare provided by the government that helps people in need so that they aren't forced to go to houses of worship when they're hungry or jobless or struggling with addictions. Third, all taxpayer support for religious education must be terminated. Religious schools have the right to exist, but many of them teach incorrect history, bad science, and bigoted views. The taxpayer should not have to support this. Fourth, our Constitution must contain explicit references for reproductive freedom, including the right to legal abortion. Our Constitution must also protect all members of the LGBTQ+ community and including the right to marry. Fifth, all forms of what we in the United States call civil religion must be eradicated. No more in God we trust on our money. No more under God in our Pledge of Allegiance. It makes second-class citizens of people who don't believe those things, and it's time for it to stop. Sixth, all of our politicians must absolutely stop preaching. That is not their job. Trump recently asserted, this is a quote, "As president, I will always defend our nation's glorious heritage and will protect the Judeo-Christian principles of our founding." He said, "We have to bring back religion in America, stronger than before." That isn't his job. We have preachers, ministers, pastors, rabbis, and others whose job it is to promote religion. It's not the politician's job. Finally, we must combat this idea in America that religion must always be treated specially simply because it is religion. Many religions preach violence. They preach intolerance. They preach hate. The state does not have to support those religions. While we must protect religious freedom for all, we are not required to tolerate organizations that are trying to make second-class citizens of so many of our Americans and take away their rights. Remember the assault on the Capitol in January 2021. If you looked at the video footage, you will notice something interesting. Many of the people in the crowd were carrying Bibles and crosses. These are extreme religious beliefs. They champion violence, chaos, and terror. We do not have to tolerate this type of thing under the guise of religious freedom. But perhaps the biggest challenge we face in America right now is that a large number of our citizens lack the sufficient intellectual firepower to fend off nonsense. And many of them are being swayed by religious extremists. Despite what these people may believe, however, reality has a way of asserting itself. Think about what we went through with the COVID pandemic. The religious fundamentalists told us it was a myth. A nefarious scheme by the government to take away our rights. We didn't have to worry about it. We didn't have to get vaccines. Some of them were saying these things right up until the moment COVID killed them. Facts have become optional to too many Americans, and this has led us to a very dangerous place. I don't know where we will end up, and to be honest, that scares me. But I do know that in the present moment, certain things can be discerned. And one of them is that it's accurate to say that the United States is no longer a country that respects the separation of church and state. It is a tragedy. We are abandoning that principle even though we pioneered it. But despite my pessimism, despite how bad I feel about what's going on in America today, I am hopeful for the future because I know some history. And I'll tell you one thing about tyrants. They don't rule forever. They inevitably fall. Just 4 years before James Madison wrote about teaching the world the lessons of America, Percy Bysshe Shelley wrote Ozymandias, a famous poem where a traveler from an antique land recalls what he saw in a forgotten desert. Two vast and trunkless legs of stone, accompanied by a warning, "Look at my works, ye mighty, in despair." There are days when I look upon what's happening in my country in despair, but then I remember the story of the poem. The traveler was seeing a fallen statue by a leader who thought he was going to rule forever. And Shelley tells us, "No thing beside remains in this forgotten desert, just decay and a colossal wreck among the sand." Tyrants fall. Their works, their grandiose monuments, their lies, they eventually tumble or they are pulled down. We are seeing signs of that in the United States right now. Trump's approval ratings are the lowest they've ever been. They are dismal and only likely to get worse as more and more Americans feel the pain of his inept economic policies. Protests are erupting nationwide. I attended one myself a few weeks ago. 12 million Americans took to the streets to tell Trump, "No kings in America," to make that clear. The metaphorical tearing down of the appalling edifice of shame built by this grifter will stop and it will fall. I have worked for this principle for 38 years, and I know that eventually we will find our way back because of our young supporters and our plan of activism that will bring America away from the death grip of the tyrants who hold it right now. So now, my friends, my task as I conclude is to say to you, simple but challenging, take the words of Madison to heed. Teach the world. Thank you.